Reading from a file. In this video, we'll look at how to read from a file. We'll look at the different file operations and the different modes that you can use when opening a file. File processing. Files are useful as a means to store data. If you create a game, you may need somewhere to store the player's score. Also, you may want to store the player's details. You may have a login system and need to store the names and password of users, as well as validate existing users, and a place to store new users' details. There are three modes of Python file operations that we will be looking at. So if we want to do some file processing, we may want to read from a file. So in order to read from a file, we will have to create ourselves a variable name to store the contents of a file. So the syntax for reading to a file is your variable name read file, then you assign it to the value of the contents of your file. So you'll have a read file equals an open function, and then new file, or the file name, whatever you call the file that you're going to read. And then obviously the modes are. In order to read a file, the file must already exist. If you try to read a file that doesn't exist, you will get an error. When you write to a file, this is similar to reading from a file. So you create yourself a file name again, then you assign it to the contents of the file. So you'll have the file name, which you can create yourself, and then the mode W. When you use, or when you're writing to a file, the contents of a file, each time you run the program, will be overwritten. So if you want to keep the contents of the file, what you would have to do is use the append mode when writing to a file. So appending mode, when you use append mode, it's similar to the read file and the write file, in that you create yourself a file name, any file name that you want to create it. You use the open function, and then the name of the file you want to append to, or the name of the file that you want to create. So with append, you can actually create a new file, or you can write to an existing file. With all file modes, or with all file processing, once you've either read a file, you've written to a file, or you appended a file, you'll need to close that file. So you would have to specify the file name that you're going to close with the reserve function, or reserve Python word close, and this will actually close your file for you. Okay, if you do not close your file, what sometimes happens is that the data that you're writing to the file may not be written to the file, so the data will fail to be written to the file. So let's look at how to read some data from a file. In order to read from a file, the file has to first exist. So in this text file, we have a list of student names and their test results out of 100. In order to read the contents of a file, we create ourselves a variable called f. We open up our file, which we've called newfile.txt. It has to be the same name that we called our text file. Also, it has to be in the same directory where the new file is kept. Okay, so we go f equals open newfile.txt, and we use the read mode. What we're going to do is use the read function to actually read the file. So I'm going to go print, okay, f.read to print the contents of the file to screen. Also, what you need to do is close the file. So we go f.close, and the file should be closed. So what we do now, we'll save it, file, save, and then we'll run it. And this runs the contents of our file. You can actually open to read a file using another method. So I'm going to show you another method to actually read the file. So I'm just going to comment this out and show you another way. So what we could do here is actually use the with command, and we're going to use the same open format for Python to open the file. However, we're going to say open the file and store it as the same variable name f, and then we need to indent. So this bit needs to be indented. I'll move this line so it's easy for you to actually be able to read it. So what we're going to do is open the file, but using another method. With this method, you do not need to tell the file, you don't need to close the file, because with this method, the file automatically is closed once the computer has finished with it. So let's run the file. Okay, so it does exactly the same thing. However, for this tutorial, we're going to use the other method and continue to close our files. Okay, so what we're going to do is now use another function called Readline to read the file line by line. So we're going to go Readline. And what this does is actually just read the contents of the file line by line. And in this case, it's just going to read the first line. So what we'll do, we'll save the file, and then we'll run it using F file on the keyboard. So this does at the moment is just give me the first line. In order for us to continue to read this file using the readline function, we would have to use a for loop. So we're going to use a for loop to loop the contents of our file. So we go for, we create ourselves a variable called I. For I in, so we're going to say for I in F, okay, F is where we've created a variable that holds the contents of our new file. So for I in F, okay, what we're going to do now is print I. And then we need to close our file. Okay, so once again, what we do is save, file, save, then run module. So as you can see, we've printed out the contents of our file, okay, line by line. We can also use a while loop to read the contents of our file. So what we've done, we've signed a variable f to the contents of our new file. And then what we do as well is sign another variable called, and we've called it each line, to read each line within our file. We're now using a while loop, okay, to read the contents of a file. So this line here states that while we don't come to the end of the file, keep reading each line. So we've got while each line doesn't equal the end of the file, okay, then what it does, it goes to get the next line to read and then prints it to the screen. So here we also need to close our program. Okay, let's save it and run it. Okay, so you can see that the program has read each line by line, and now it's ended when it's encountered the end of a line, end of file. There may be times when you want to extract certain words, lines, or characters from a file. So what we're going to do is extract all the student names from this file. So what we're going to do is use a for loop. So we're going to go for, I'm going to create a variable called line in our file. So I'm going to do use the f variable that we use to contain the contents of our new file. Okay, then I'm going to create another variable called each word. Okay, and then I'm going to assign it to line, and then we're going to use the split function. That's going to split the contents of our file into a list. So let's have a look at it. So we go to print. Okay, we can print the contents of our file in the list format. So I'm going to print it there. Okay, so if I go File, Save, and let's run, and then we can see that we've got the contents of our file in a list format. Okay, so what we want to do here, we want to extract just the students' first names. If we remember watching my other videos, you'll realize that in Python and in other languages, when you index lists, they always start from 0. So we can say that all the student names are at position 0. So that's position 0, that's position 1. So we're going to now print out position 0. So what should happen now is that it should just print out all the students' names. So we use index. In order to do this, we use square brackets, and we go. All right, so what we do here again, we run it, we save, and we run. So that just gives us all the student names. If we want just all the students' results, okay, which we've said that the results is at index 1, we select each word index 1. So once again, we save, we run module, and we've got all the students' grades. I will speak more about the split function and our strip function in another video. We'll go more details into that.